I swear, officer, I didn't see anything. I just pulled over for a second. I didn't do anything wrong.
Show me your military ID. Officer, this is a federal vehicle. I'm Special Agent Earl Colton with the FBI. Everyone's a cop when they get pulled over. That sentence ended a career, because 72 hours later, the Pentagon intervened, and months later, Officer Bruce Mercer stood in federal court facing 12 years in prison, not for a shootout, not for corruption uncovered over years, but for what he did in 6 minutes at a gas station. He tased a man sitting calmly in his own car, a man who announced every movement, a man who identified himself clearly repeatedly, a man whose job was investigating police misconduct. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. This was power unchecked meeting the wrong person. Before we go further, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your state in the comments. And if you believe accountability matters not just when it's convenient, hit subscribe. Because this story isn't really about a traffic stop. It's about how many warning signs were ignored, how many complaints were dismissed, and why the system only reacted when the violence reached someone it couldn't ignore. The real question isn't why Officer Mercer stopped Earl Colton. The question is why no one stopped Mercer before this. And the answer to that question should make you uncomfortable. Earl Colton was 42 years old. For 12 years, he worked inside the FBI's Civil Rights Division, the unit responsible for investigating police departments when officers crossed constitutional lines. He wasn't a field agent chasing headlines. He was the man departments hoped they'd never hear from. Colton testified before grand juries 17 times. He helped draft portions of the Bureau's guidelines on constitutional policing. He trained local departments on what lawful use of force actually meant. He understood traffic stops better than most officers on the street. He understood how quickly they could turn deadly. And he understood exactly how to survive one. On this Tuesday evening, Colton wasn't on patrol. He wasn't running an operation. He wasn't wearing a vest or carrying visible authority. He was driving home after meeting a confidential informant connected to a gang case. No sirens. No urgency. Just another end-of-day drive. The irony couldn't be sharper. The man who spent his career documenting abuse of power was about to experience it firsthand. He had no reason to believe this stop would be any different from the hundreds he'd studied professionally. But in less than 10 minutes, Colton would learn something his training never promised. That doing everything right does not guarantee safety when the person with the badge has already decided how the encounter will end. At chasse patruzech, she chinch p.m. Earl Colton pulled into a Shell gas station just off the highway. He chose a public, well-lit space, the kind experts recommend if you're ever stopped at night. Bright lights. Cameras everywhere. Witnesses nearby. Colton had taught this exact scenario in training sessions. He placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. He turned on the interior dome light. He rolled the window down halfway. Before he reached for anything, he spoke. My hands are visible. Every movement was announced before it happened. Textbook procedure. Officer Bruce Mercer approached the driver's side with his flashlight raised. The beam aimed directly at Colton's face. The interior light was already on. Mercer shined the light anyway. Not to see. To assert control, the flashlight stayed fixed on Colton's eyes, forcing him to blink. Momentarily disoriented, Colton didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't challenge authority. He waited, because in encounters like this, the tone is set in the first 10 seconds, and Mercer had already chosen his. Mercer spoke without hesitation. Your windows are illegally tinted. The accusation landed flat. Rehearsed. Familiar. Colton didn't raise his voice, didn't challenge the officer's authority. He responded with facts. Officer, these windows measure 32% light transmission. State law allows 35%. Then he added the detail that should have ended the stop immediately. This is a federal vehicle. Federal law enforcement vehicles are exempt from local window tint regulations when operating on official business. Mercer's expression changed. His jaw tightened. His shoulders squared. I'll be the judge of that. That response wasn't uncertainty. It was defiance. Later investigations would show Mercer had used window tint as a pretext dozens of times before. 47 traffic stops in 18 months. 87% involving minority drivers. Most resulted in no citations. Several tickets were later dismissed after drivers proved their tint was legal. Mercer wasn't enforcing the law. He was using the law. And in this moment, Colton recognized the shift. This stop was no longer about a violation. It was about control. If you were in Colton's seat right now, what would you do? Comply silently and hope it ends, or explain calmly and risk escalation? Colton chose to explain. That choice would change everything. Colton took a breath. He understood exactly where this was heading. Officer, I want to be clear, he said calmly. I'm Special Agent Earl Colton with the FBI. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't challenged authority. He simply stated a fact. Mercer didn't respond to the title, license and registration. Colton nodded. Yes. Sir, they're in my center console. Before I move, I need to inform you my FBI credentials are on my person. Mercer's eyes narrowed. Colton announced again. Slower this time. I am Special Agent Earl Colton. Badge number 34782. Atlanta Field Office. That should have ended the encounter. Instead, Mercer's hand drifted toward his duty belt. Out of the car. The command was sharp. Final. Colton paused not in defiance, but calculation. He knew what this moment represented. Once an officer orders you out, the balance shifts. Control tightens. Options narrow. Colton complied. As he opened the door, he announced his identity a third time. This vehicle is registered to the FBI motor pool. Everything I'm telling you can be verified with one radio call. Mercer laughed short. Dismissive. Everyone's a cop when they get pulled over. That laugh wasn't humor. It was permission. Permission. In Mercer's mind. To stop listening. Permission to escalate. Colton stepped out of the vehicle slowly. He kept his hands visible, raised to chest level. I'm exiting the car now, he said clearly. My hands are visible. As his feet touched the pavement, he spoke again. My FBI credentials are in my right hip pocket. I'm not reaching for anything unless instructed. Mercer didn't answer. Instead, his posture changed. His shoulders squared. His stance widened. His hand moved not to his radio, but to his taser. Colton saw it immediately. This was the moment his training warned about. The moment when explanation stops mattering. I'm going to retrieve my credentials now, Colton said, slowly. Before his fingers moved more than an inch, Mercer shouted, Gun, he's reaching for a gun. The words were loud, sharp, theatrical. They weren't meant for Colton. They were meant for the body camera. This was narrative construction, the instant creation of justification before force is applied. Colton responded without raising his voice. That is not true. There is no gun in my pocket. My service weapon is secured in the vehicle. Per federal protocol. He paused. I am complying. For a brief moment, everything hung still. And then Mercer pulled the trigger. 50,000 volts tore through Earl Colton's body. Every muscle locked at once. He didn't fall forward. He collapsed straight down, like his nervous system had been switched off. His face struck the pavement. The sound was dull, final. Blood spread beneath his cheek almost immediately. The taser cycle lasted 5 seconds. 5 seconds that felt endless. Colton couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly. His body convulsed, completely beyond his control. When the electrical current stopped, he tried to inhale. Before he could draw a full breath, Mercer fired again. The second deployment hit a man already on the ground, already incapacitated, hands nowhere near his body. Colton's muscles seized harder this time. There was no resistance, no movement toward the officer, no threat. This wasn't use of force. It was punishment. The second cycle ended. Colton lay face down, gasping, unable to move voluntarily. Then Mercer fired a third time. "Let's see how tough you are now." The words were clear, captured on body camera audio. They stripped away every remaining excuse. 3 taser deployments. On a compliant man. On an incapacitated man. On a man who posed zero threat. This was no longer a traffic stop. This was assault, and everyone watching knew it. During the third taser cycle, something slipped free. Colton's leather credential case fell from his pocket and hit the pavement. It landed open. A gold FBI badge reflected the gas station lights. Next to it, a photo identification card. His face, his name, the official seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, unmistakable. The proof Colton had tried to show from the beginning now lay in plain sight. Mercer stepped forward. He stepped over the badge, didn't look down, didn't hesitate, didn't acknowledge what was directly beneath his boots. Instead, he grabbed Colton's arms and wrenched them behind his back. Colton was still shaking from the electrical shock, still struggling to breathe. Blood smeared across the concrete as he tried to lift his head. Mercer snapped the handcuffs closed. Metal on bone. The badge remained on the ground 3 feet from Colton's face. Ignored. This wasn't confusion. This was willful blindness. Mercer keyed his radio. His voice suddenly controlled. Official. Dispatch. Show me code 4. 1 in custody. Combative suspect reached for a weapon. Requesting backup for transport. The false narrative entered the record in real time. Every word designed to justify what the cameras had already captured. Not a combative suspect. Not a weapon. A compliant federal agent. Announcing every movement. 7 witnesses watched in silence. Phones raised. Hands frozen. Fear kept them still. Because everyone there understood one thing. If Mercer was willing to do this, he could do it again. Backup arrived 6 minutes after Mercer's radio call. 2 patrol cars rolled into the gas station lot. Officer James Calder stepped out first. 15 years on the force. A reputation for professionalism. His eyes moved quickly from Colton on the ground to Mercer standing over him, to the objects scattered on the pavement. Then he saw it. Calder knelt and picked up the leather case. The gold badge caught the light. The photo ID showed Colton's face. The federal seal was unmistakable. Calder's voice dropped. Urgent but controlled. "Bruce, these are federal credentials." Mercer snatched the case from his hands. He stared at the badge. Then the ID. Then the seal. The color drained from his face. In that instant, everything changed. The aggressive posture vanished. The authority dissolved. The man who had acted with absolute certainty seconds earlier now looked small. Another officer ran the vehicle registration. He looked up from the computer. Expression hard. "This vehicle is registered to the FBI. Federal government vehicle." Calder keyed his radio. Dispatch. We need a supervisor immediately. And notify the FBI Atlanta field office. Repeat agent involved incident. Colton, still cuffed on the ground, finally spoke. I want this documented. Every word. Secure the body camera footage immediately. This is now a federal investigation. Mercer didn't respond. He didn't need to. He already knew. His authority had ended the moment the badge hit the ground. Within 20 minutes, the gas station no longer looked like a traffic stop. It looked like a multi-agency crime scene. FBI supervisors arrived first, then internal affairs, then county officials. Different badges, different jurisdictions. One conclusion forming fast. This wasn't an officer-involved incident. It was a federal assault. Mercer's body camera was seized on the spot. FBI technical agents documented the chain of custody, uploaded the footage to secured federal servers, and created multiple redundant copies. No edits, no delays, no room for lost evidence. The video was devastating. It showed Colton complying at every step, announcing his identity 5 separate times, announcing every movement before making it. Hands visible. No sudden gestures. It captured Mercer's shout, "Gun." He's reaching for a gun, followed immediately by footage that proved the statement false. Colton's hand moved slowly toward his hip pocket, exactly where he said his credentials were. The footage recorded all 3 taser deployments. The first on a compliant man, the second on an incapacitated man, the third on a man face down, handcuffed, posing zero threat. Most damning of all, it captured Mercer's voice. Let's see how tough you are now. Those words transformed a defense case into a prosecution exhibit. From that moment on, the outcome was no longer a question of if, only how severe. The indictment came down 3 weeks later. 5 federal counts: aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, deprivation of rights under color of law, assault with a dangerous weapon, filing false police reports, obstruction of justice, maximum exposure 15 years in federal prison. At trial, Mercer's defense team followed a familiar script. They claimed fear. The prosecution played the body camera footage. The jury watched Colton comply. Hands visible. Movements announced. No sudden gestures. The fear argument collapsed. They claimed Colton failed to properly identify himself. The prosecution played the audio again. Special Agent Earl Colton, FBI. Atlanta field office. 5 times. Clear. Undeniable. That argument collapsed. They claimed Mercer made a split-second decision under stress. The prosecution presented the timeline. 3 taser deployments, separated by seconds. Each a conscious choice, not split-second. Deliberate. That argument collapsed, too. Expert witnesses testified on use of force standards. A taser may only be deployed to stop an active threat. Colton posed none. Any taser deployment after the first constituted battery. By the 3rd deployment, the legal line wasn't blurred. It was obliterated. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. 90. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts. And for the first time since the taser fired, Bruce Mercer had no authority left to hide behind. Less. District Judge Linda Redmond delivered the sentence herself. Her tone was calm, precise, unforgiving. "Officer Mercer," she said, "you fabricated a legal justification to stop a man committing no crime. When he identified himself and attempted to comply, you escalated to violence." She paused. "You deployed a taser 3 times on an incapacitated man who posed no threat. This was not policing. This was assault under color of law. The sentence followed: 12 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole. Law enforcement certification permanently revoked. Mercer was led away in silence. His badge gone. His authority gone. His career erased in minutes, just as he had erased Colton's dignity on the pavement. Earl Colton recovered after months of medical treatment. He returned to duty. Was promoted. Now trains agents and officers on constitutional policing at the FBI Academy. The man who was tased for doing everything right now teaches others how to do their jobs without destroying lives. But here's the question that matters. Earl Colton had a badge. Federal authority. Training. Cameras everywhere. And it still took 3 Taser deployments for accountability to begin. So what happens to people without badges, without witnesses, without cameras? If this story made you think, hit like. If it made you uncomfortable, share it. Because accountability doesn't happen on its own. It only happens when the truth is impossible to ignore. See you in the next one.